It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, we're back. We're joined again by Richard Rashke, the author of the book Killing of Karen Silkwood, the story behind the Kerr-McGee Plutonium case. And we left off, he was telling us about the crime scene of the car accident. The car had been brought to this Ford dealership, auto dealership there, and then the Kerr-McGee folks showed up in moon suits, and it seems like they cleared everything out. Is that where we left off, Mr. Rashke?
Yes, but they may not have been Kerr-McGee. They could have been AEC, or they could have been CIA. Those would be the three normal targets. Whatever it is, they lied. They didn't have to have the moon suits on. It was pretty good staging. And whoever they were, they may have lied to Ted Sebring, the owner of the garage, in order to get access. Okay, now, Karen Silkwood was no dumbbell. She was a nuclear lab analyst, and she had won a scholarship for 1 year of junior college because she was the chairperson of the science club in her high school. She's a sharp cookie. So the first place she hid documents was in the ceiling, a false ceiling in a closet. But she noticed that people had been checking her. She set little traps. Had been checking her locker and her car and moved stuff around. So when she got her really sensitive documents, those like photographs showing falsified quality control documents and defective fuel rods and all of that, as well as if she had them, the inventory reports on plutonium was missing. She hid them in a barn. Now, as on your way to Oklahoma City from the Hub Cafe in Crescent, you come to this dirt oil road I spoke about earlier where the cops saw skid marks, but they didn't have a 45-degree angle, so he wasn't interested. She took that road, and way back in about a mile was a farm, an abandoned farm owned by her roommate's family. Her roommate was Sherry Ellis. She also was a lab technician. And Ellis's family owned the place. Nobody was living there. But Ellis kept a horse there. So Karen, day off, would go horseback riding and all that stuff. So she took her documents and she hid them in a tractor barn on a shelf. And the night when she left the Hub Cafe, a car followed her at a discreet distance. There were two men inside. It was a dark car. Nobody could give you a better description than just dark. So when she got to the oil road, she cut down it. And when the chase car came, they couldn't find her. They kept going down the highway towards Oklahoma City, and there was no Karen Silkwood. Then it dawned on them that maybe there was another road. So they went back and they found the oil road. Now they're going down the oil road towards the barn, and here comes Silkwood back to the highway, and she saw the chase car there, and they tried to flag her down. She wouldn't stop. She managed to get around them. There was an easy place for the chase car to turn around because there were spots where cutoffs, so the oil trucks could get onto the field, wide, empty swaths. So they could turn the car around. They chased her down that dirt road, and when she got back to the main highway, she got on the road, and the chase car followed her and nicked her, bumped her on the left bumper. And when they bumped her, she's probably going as fast as she could, maybe 50 miles an hour. She momentarily lost control of the car, was destabilized. And she was an autocrosser. She drove a car with these racing windows. She won trophies going around pylons in parking lots as a racer. She managed to get the car onto the shoulder at a 45-degree angle, and the tread marks showed that she straightened it out, and she used hands-on, hands-off driving. In other words, she didn't force the car to go anywhere. She let it go by itself, and when it started to move right or left, she grabbed the wheel and straightened it out. And the marks show that just before she smashed into the cement wing wall that she didn't see, she looked over her right shoulder, and the tread marks show that she was moving up to get back onto the highway and then run for it. And she didn't see the wing wall, and bammo. Now, how do we know this? Well, first of all, Echo said so. I'll get back to that in a minute. But there's another reason. When the highway patrolman, Rick Fagan, said she died under the influence, she fell asleep because she was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, and that was why she died. First, let me correct that. He was wrong. The autopsy showed she had no alcohol in her blood. They had a little residue from the night before when she had some Bloody Marys, but that was not considered any, significant in any way. And she was taking sleeping pills, Quaaludes, which has the drug methaqualone. And at that time, in the 1974, nobody knew that methaqualone was addictive. And Karen Silkwood, let's say it, was taking more methaqualone than was prescribed. And so he saw a little cigarette, a marijuana cigarette in her purse, and he found a half of a Quaalude in her purse, and he assumed that she was under drugs. Now,
do we know how much Quaalude was in her system, though?
Yes, I'll tell you exactly.
Okay.
35 milligrams, 0.35 milligrams is therapeutic. By that I mean it's what your doctor tells you can take safely. 50 is toxic. She had 35, which is on the lower side of halfway. Now, she'd been on this medication for 3 months. She was abusing it, how not as much as her enemies said she was abusing it. And so there is, and I'm speculating now, a better than 80% chance that she had developed a certain resistance to the drug. In order to get what she was looking for, she had to take a little more.
Yeah,
we don't
know
any of that.
Everyone was
All we
taking
know
Quaaludes.
is the following. Yeah. Because an independent accident investigator was hired by Karen's union, oil, chemical, and atomic workers, who said that the police report and the autopsy report is a crock and it's a cover-up. Their word, not mine. I'm not a conspiracy buff. So they hired a superb accident investigator who had investigated more than 2,000 accidents involving cars and trucks and testified at more than 300 trials. What he found was a fresh dent on the left side where Echo said to us that the chase car pushed her a little bit and she lost control. And that bumper was removed and sent to the University of New Mexico to have scientists, a chemist and a physicist, to look at it. And the conclusion was a fresh dent, no road film, scratches that indicated it was hit, and the scratches were not made when the car was pulled out of the ditch on a hoist. because the scratches then would have been in a different direction. There would have been rock, mud, and stuff inside the dent. And the chemist said, are you listening, Ed?
Yes.
There were black smudges in there, above it and inside, and the black smudges tested for rubber. So the evidence indicates precisely what Echo told me later, that somebody bumped her from the rear, and that's how she died instantly. Now, what were they after? I mean, why were they chasing her? For one reason only. First of all, we know they were chasing her for her documents, not because they were carrying a neon sign that said, we want your documents, Karen. Because what happened next? What happened next is they conned their way into Sebring's Ford and collected all the documents. So they got what they wanted. But here is what I think they wanted to do. Please note I said before that Echo told us that while she was coming back down the dirt oil road and they were coming to, they waved her. They tried to get her to stop the car. She wouldn't. Why would they want her to stop the car? Well, we know what they were after, her documents. So here's what could have happened. We don't know. They could have said, Sarah, we got $50,000 in the suitcase here. Take the $50,000, give us your documents, tell the New York Times whatever you want, and when you're finished with negotiations at Kerr-McGee, the union negotiation, contract negotiations, quit and go home, keep the money. If she said yes, they get what they want. After they got what they want, you have to open another question. Do they trust her? Would they have killed her? Possibly. We don't know that. But what they could have done, and we have seen two other cases where witnesses who threatened Kerr-McGee in terms of the negligence lawsuit died very, very strangely and suddenly just dropped dead and no autopsies. So it's possible they brought with her a syringe loaded with methacqualone. And all they had to do was inject her and babysit her until she passed out and then stage an accident, and that would be the end of it. We don't know any of that, but we do know that they got the documents, and if it hadn't been for the trial and for sworn depositions from her friend Jean Young, who described those documents, they may have gotten away with the fact there weren't any. Now, let me go back to Echo. Echo had the highest government clearance that an FBI agent can have. And he was working in the downtown headquarters here in Washington, D.C., where I'm at right now, and my house on Capitol Hill. And he had reason to go in there to look at certain documents he was authorized to see. Karen Silkwood was not one of those documents. The room had a special file, or perhaps all the documents in the room were part of a file called Codename June Mail. I checked it out, and it existed. There was a thing called June Mail, and it contained highly secret documents, sensitive documents the FBI did not want the world to know they existed. And one of those documents was the FBI's final report on the death of Silkwood. So Echo gets in the room. Nobody else is in there. He doesn't know how much time he has. He goes to the June Mail S under Silkwood, finds the final report, which exists. I'll tell you why in a minute. It's about 60 pages, and there was an executive summary, and all he could get was to look at the executive summary, and he got down to the night she died, and in essence, he told me what I'm telling you. And what I've done to that is added evidence from others like accident investigator, etc., that shows that he was absolutely correct. Now, Richard is no dumbbell like Karen Silkwood. I'm no dumbbell. First thing I did was go after the FBI under Freedom of Information and said, I want the final report on the death of Karen Silkwood. They sent me the final report on the contamination of Karen Silkwood. Accident? So I went back again, waited a bit. Final report, and here's what they said. Without admitting that this document exists or doesn't exist, if it exists, we can't give it to you because it's exempt under the rules or the regulations of the Freedom of Information Act because it contains methods and sources. We heard about that recently, haven't we?
Yeah.
With the Mueller report about hiding sources and methods. So I waited. There's an old trick you can play. When you file under Freedom of Information and they say go jump in the lake, that's one person. But if you file again later on, you get a different person. And maybe that second person won't tell you to jump in the lake. So that's what happened. They admitted the file exists. They told me how many pages it was. They told me that, fortunately for me, the FBI signed off on it, that I can have it. They didn't say how much would be redacted or blacked out. But then they added, before it can be released to you, it must be screened by a second agency. Been there before, Ed. Took 2 years, sometimes 3 years, for the second agency to get back to you. I don't know why, but were they stalling on purpose? And I don't know who the second agency is. It had to be one or two. It had to be either the CIA or the old Atomic Energy Commission. And that report would say which agency was involved. It would probably give the names of the two agents and would have those blacked out for privacy reasons. And so I'm still waiting.
What about so no one's been brought to justice for this? No one.
What happened was, I don't want to bore your audience and you with all the legal mumbo jumbo, but let me say it started off. The family filed a lawsuit that said Kerr-McGee violated the civil rights of Karen Silkwood by snooping on her and tapping her telephone, etc. And they violated her civil rights because she was a member of the union. And the judge threw it out saying, the law you're quoting applied back to black people in the 1890s. It does not apply to whites. Next, they narrowed it down, and they said, okay, there was a conspiracy on the part of the FBI, the CIA, Kerr-McGee, Oklahoma police, etc., to harass her and conduct electronic and photographic surveillance that was illegal because he didn't have court orders. And the judge said, you're fishing. Witch hunt. You're fishing. And he threw it out. So that only left negligence. So the family set another lawsuit, refined it, saying that Kerr-McGee was negligent in handling the plutonium that contaminated Karen Silkwood, and went to trial. And I was there, and it was a long trial. She won. She won the biggest settlement in a civil suit the country has ever seen up to that point, something like $21 million. And the first question the jury had to answer, after hearing all the evidence, does the evidence or preponderance of the evidence tell you that Silkwood contaminated herself? And they came back and said no. The evidence shows she did not contaminate herself. So the Kerr-McGee and the FBI and the CIA and everybody involved had from 1974 to 1979, with all their power and all their money and all their legal authority, and they could not prove that she contaminated herself. And then Kerr-McGee appealed. And it didn't appeal on the basis that, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. It said, without admitting that we did anything wrong, we're not liable. Because we work for the federal government in a nuclear program, we are shielded from all liability. Translated in language everyone else can understand. Even though we're grossly negligent, we don't have to pay anybody anything. The federal government protects us from lawsuits. That went to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, is walking distance from my house. I was there for the hearing. Karen Silkwood won. The Supreme Court came back and said Kerr-McGee is liable for negligence in this case. And then the only other issue at stake then was another trial. And Silkwood's father was ill, and the family was torn apart and disoriented and angry and upset, so they settled out of court for a couple $1 million. And, of course, lawyers got huge chunks. So that's the sad end. And did Karen Silkwood make a difference? Yes and no. The nuclear industry continued to do across the country exactly what Kerr-McGee did, and there have been investigations, and all that is on public record. Thousands of polluted and abandoned sites across the United States by these folks. And people that have injured and died of some kind of cancer related to this pollution is outrageous, but they got away with it. Everybody got away with it. Karen Silkwood made a difference in one small way. We had a new whistleblowers law, and her small handprints and her big, big heart prints are all over that. She was able to get some legislation that would protect whistleblowers like herself. So she was never a member of the National Organization of Women, and posthumously they gave her they made her a member forever. A big celebration.
A couple of questions for you. Now, what about the town, Cimarron? There was pollution all over there, too. Any justice for those people?
No. They don't monitor this stuff. You look at it, if you study the Superfund, all the places that have been terribly polluted, they all got away with it. And sometimes they monitor the water, and they tell you can't drink this water. This is where I live now. I go fishing in Maryland in some lakes, and the fishing license from Maryland says only eat so many pounds of the fish you catch.
Oh, boy.
Because anything more than that, we can't guarantee anything. So I imagine somebody tested the water at the Cimarron River. I'm not into that. All I know is that, as far as I know, there have been no serious follow-up studies on 150 to 300 workers who worked at Kerr-McGee during the 2 years the plant stayed open, 1972 to 74, many of whom have moved away. And I don't think there was anything done about the contamination of the site, the outside of the plant. I know the plant is still contaminated, and it does not, it's boarded up. By the way, it was built in Tornado Alley.
Oh, my God. Now, what about there's more
piles of plutonium sitting on the table, and it was in Tornado Alley. Oh, gosh.
Now, there's plants like this still up and running today. Are any new precautions being taken, or do you think they're still being run the same way?
Well, I think they're still being run the same way to a certain extent. Follow the money. So when you have a corporate contractor that is making stuff for the federal government, they're a profit organization, and the human greed never changes. It's like that old tiger, you know. It just doesn't change the stripes. So greed is greed, and they will tend to cut corners if they're not properly inspected, and sometimes inspectors are on the take and there's corruption. So it is still pretty bad. I've been dealing with a couple of guys that have been severely contaminated in a plant in Ohio, a nuclear facility that dealt with liquid stuff rather than strictly plutonium pellets. And they said to me, "Hey, this is a replica of the Silkwood case." It's the same thing. That a guy would come in and he would go into the office and we'd get a nasal swat, and the SWAT would say, "You got your number is 120, which is very high." Somebody would change the number on the official report to 80, and there would be two reports: the one that said 120 and a falsified report that said 80. And that would keep the company from liability. All this stuff still goes on.
Mr. Rashke, we're out of time. What do you want to leave us with?
Silkwood is back. That's what I want to leave it with. She's back, and I think she may get her due. I think she will be back even more so in the news in the next few years, because there is huge concern today about whistleblowing, as we know. Julian Assange and Snowden and Chelsea Manning and others. And so the debate goes on whether whistleblowing is good and necessary, or whether all whistleblower is treasonous. And Karen Silkwood is the only one that I know of that ended up dead. And believe me, I'm not exaggerating when I say her motives were the purest. She was not out to get Kerr-McGee, a little revenge. She didn't want the plant to close. She was not against nuclear power. She wanted health and safety protections for workers like herself. And she fought for them, and she died for the cause. So here you're looking at me, Ed. I began this story in 1981. Oh, how many years ago was that? And I'm still at it. I won't give up.
Now, real quick, though, they made a movie about this with Meryl Streep when she was a young girl looking back. Just imagine.
Yeah.
Now, but no mention of the CIA and none of this other stuff. Has any of this other information you've reported today, has that been reported anywhere else?
No.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what happened. I wrote a book, and I covered exactly what the movie covered. And then I began a next section of the book with a broad question, okay, what happened next? And that's where you get all this stuff that I'm talking about. Now, what the movie did is it took you to, I took you to the Hub Cafe in Crescent the night she died. And they play that scene the way it should be played. And she makes a phone call to her boyfriend to pick up David Burnham that's in there. All that's accurate. She picks up her documents. Gene Young is there, and she points to him and said, and Silkwood said, I'm going to get him on this. I got him on health and safety on this. She picks him up. She goes out the door. She puts him in the Honda. She takes off. And she gets on the highway to Oklahoma City, and she sees headlights in the rear view mirror. And the radio is playing Amazing Grace. And the car gets closer and closer and closer, and you see Silkwood's eyes get bigger and bigger, and you see a real tribute to the actress. You see the fear in her eyes. Whammo, end the movie. I pick up after that. And I take it all the way through the trial, all the way to the bitter end.
Man, you've done an excellent job. I can't thank you enough for this. This is excellent reporting and great radio, too. You have great storytelling ability there. The Killing of Karen Silkwood, the story behind Kerr-McGee Plutonium case. We're talking to Richard Rashke, written many, many books. I recommend people check out all his work. Richard Rashke, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Take care. Bye.
Good night. Oh, boy, man, great stuff, man. Like I said, a lot of this stuff has never been reported anywhere else. Exclusive, but from Richard Rashke, exclusive work here. And check out his body of work, too, as well. You can tell this guy's no fooling around. The Killing of Karen Silkwood, the story behind Kerr-McGee Plutonium case. Thank you so much. If you like today's show, again, too, this will probably be in the members section. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do because everything's all upside down. But if you're a member now, we can still use donations, too. We just lost YouTube, so we can use donations and subscriptions and stuff like that. And the sponsors, if you know somebody has a business wants to, we can promote. If you have a website or something like that, we can promote it worldwide. That works out very well. So thank you so much, Richard Rashke. This is the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, wishing you a good night.